Morning, everyone. It's good to see everybody here this morning, and for those of you in the lot, it's good to see you out there. I can see some of you, the Ingalls and James, and for those of you in the basement, we have some in the basement with us this morning. It's good to have you all with us today. I would say this, it's a nice day. It's nice-ish day. Those folks who are with us in these ways are here so that they can participate in the worship, but so that they can visit and be a part of the church family outside afterwards. So if you are so inclined, I would encourage you, if you have a jacket, whenever services are over, we can just move outside and we can visit all together. And so I appreciate so much the effort that everybody is making to be here and to be a part of the family and to participate however we can during this time. Thank you for that. For those of you who are visiting with us this morning, it's good to see you. Lots of new babies. I've said it 100 times and I'll say it for the rest of my life. Baby noise in worship is a good thing, and we all need to be on board with that, because baby noise in worship means that there are babies in the worship. That's our future, and so we're glad for that. I will say this before we get started. I got a couple housekeeping things. First of all, I'll do this one. Ryan, you made your comment about being here. Truly, the blessing is ours. The pleasure is ours. So we're glad that you're a part of this family, and just you as you are is more than enough, but your song leading this morning is a great blessing to us, and so we're looking forward to walking to heaven alongside you. For those of you who are online, or if you plan to be online next week, next Sunday morning we'll be doing different stuff. We'll have 9 a.m. Bible study, and then 10 a.m. worship. So that's new for us, to add the 9 a.m. Bible study. We haven't done it since March 15th. And for those of you who are online, it's going to look just a little bit different, and I can't tell you what that's going to look like just yet. We'll try and figure it out, but we'll have to do some trial and error, because up to this point, we schedule a video on Facebook Live, and then it goes live 15 minutes before the video starts, and it's just there and you see it. But we're going to have 2 back-to-back, and you can only schedule 1 at a time, at least as far as I know. And so we'll be starting those up manually, and so just go to the Ellisville Church Facebook page and look for live videos, and I can't tell you exactly what that's going to look like yet, but be patient, because it will be there. I just don't know when or how, but we will be live in that way. Okay. Lots of housekeeping. I guess that's to be expected to wrap up 2020, right? It's been a long year. In Matthew chapter 6 and verse 1, we're going to be talking about this verse that Ryan mentioned just a second ago. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. This is going to be something that we're going to have to remember where we've come from up to this point. As we've gone through the Sermon on the Mount, if you had any question in your mind about what it means to be a Christian, or what I'm supposed to be doing right now in my life, what I'm supposed to be trying for and actively striving for in my life, for the last 19 lessons, 20 lessons now, basically every single lesson that we've talked about has been, what does it mean to be a Christian? What does it look like for us? And so I'm not going to review all of chapter 5 in the Sermon on the Mount up to this point, but there is one thing that I need you to see right now, starting in chapter 5 and verse 3. This is the beginning of the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemaker, and those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And then some more about that. And then in verses 13 through 16, there is our call to action, our commission to action. It is to say, here are the qualities, the characteristics that a person of God needs to have or be striving for in order to live a life devoted to God's service. And then Jesus follows that up by saying, now go and do it. Be salt. Be something that preserves the world. Be something that brings flavor to the world, whatever the salt means. And this is the one that I especially want us to focus on and look at for this context. In verse 14, you are a light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all those who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. That first piece is important for us because moving into our verse for this morning, we're supposed to live the Beatitudes and do the Beatitudes. And as we live those and do those, people are supposed to see us. They're supposed to look at us and say, here is a person who is poor in spirit. Here's a person who mourns over the sin of this world and over the sin in their life. And here's a person who's meek, and here's a peacemaker. And as we live those qualities, that light shines out into the world, and the world sees it. And specifically in verse 16, you really need to pay attention to this one for this lesson. It says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works, and here's the key, and give glory to your Father. When I am living after the steps of Christ and doing what I'm supposed to be doing, the result of that is that it points to God and God gets the glory. But still, I need you to notice right now that people are supposed to see our Christian life. It's a light that shines into the world. Starting in verse 17, Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And then at the very end of this section, in verse 20, he says, I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. So this is a two-part thing up to this point. We are supposed to have a righteousness that is fuller and deeper, of a higher quality than that of the Pharisees and the scribes in the world that Jesus was living in and talking in. We're supposed to have that high level of righteousness, and other people are supposed to see that righteousness. And it shines light and glorifies God as they see it. But since we're talking about this righteousness, that brings us to where we are now in chapter 6 and verse 1. Beware of practicing that righteousness before other people. And this is the key. The whole point of this lesson. In order to be seen by them. We don't do what we do so that other people see us. And the opposite of what we've seen in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16, so that others may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. We don't do this righteousness so that people in the world can see me and look at me, which ultimately points the spotlight and glory to me and myself. It is not for the purpose of being seen. And so I'm going to emphasize this a couple of different times because I feel tempted to do this myself, but through the years, I've watched so many people abuse and misunderstand this passage in so many different ways. We'll talk about some different examples of the how we do things and how we don't do things. So when we give, in just a second, we'll say, put your left hand in your pocket so your right hand doesn't know what you're doing. Becky and I literally know a woman. This is not a preacher story. This is not something that I heard one time about somebody else. We know somebody who, when the contribution plate comes around, sticks her left hand in her pocket. So, because the verse says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. I'm pretty sure that's not the point here. And there's issues, there's all kinds of stuff that comes up in thinking about what we're talking about here with this doing what we do, not to be seen. How does that work, especially since giving is a part of this congregation? How does that work with the contribution? I mean, we haven't done this since March, But pre-March, what we did is we passed the contribution plate around. And if you're sitting in the back, you can see everybody. You can see it happening. And so how are we going to do that thing? I think what we need to do this morning is to really appreciate the distinction. Yes, we are to have a higher level of righteousness than the scribes and Pharisees. It's a righteousness of the heart. Yes, people are supposed to see that righteousness. In fact, there are 3 places in 1 John that I would just point real quick. We're not going to look at the context or anything, but it's at least worth noticing because this word practices righteousness in all of these 3 places is the exact same word that you see in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people. 1 John 2:29. If you know that he is righteous, that's God. Yes, he is, and we know it. If you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born from him, of him. And so the way that we know that we are God's children is that we live righteous lives like he is righteous. And if I'm living a righteous life like God is righteous, people ought to see that. That is a thing that's visible to the world. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 7, little children, let no one deceive you. Whoever practices righteousness is righteous as he is righteous. Chapter 3 and verse 10, by this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of God, nor is the one who does not love his brother. And so we are called to live a higher level of righteousness than the scribes and Pharisees. People are supposed to see it. It's our life. When people look at us, they're supposed to see us. But the key is that we don't do it for the purpose of being seen by others and drawing attention to ourselves. I like the NET. The NET in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 1, it says the same thing, but it says it in a way that makes the point. Be careful not to display your righteousness merely to be seen by people. That's not our goal. It's not our purpose and what we're trying to accomplish. R.T. France, a commentary on Matthew, the disciple's life is inevitably and rightly public, but that does not entitle him to show off his religious devotion. There is a world of difference between living a conspicuously good and godly life and striving to gain a reputation for piety. It's the difference between I'm trying to live a life that glorifies God versus I'm trying to make it so other people can see me and say, wow, that's a religious person. Those are different, wildly different. And this is the problem, I think, with this lesson, and the difficult thing as we think about this is at the end of the day, we're talking about doing the same things, but for different reasons. It's the motive that matters. It's what's in our heart that ultimately matters. To finish off this quote, the difference lies not only in the motive, but in the result. The former brings glory to God, the latter brings glory to the performer. Okay, so there is that. As you move through Matthew chapter 6, there is a formula here. There are 4 different pieces of the formula. There are 3 different pieces to each one of these, but 4 different sections of the formula. The first one is a warning, and you should be able to see this pretty easily in your text, starting in verse 2. It says, thus, so we don't do what we do in order to be seen by people. Thus, here's an example of that. Part number 1 of the formula. This is the warning. Don't do this. When you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogue and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. That's the key in all of this. When you give, don't draw attention to yourself so that you may be seen by other people. In verse 5, you have the second one. And when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners. Why? That they may be seen by others. Yes, we're supposed to pray, but no, we're not supposed to do it for the purpose of being seen by other people. In verse 16, this is the third one. When you fast, Do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces and their fasting. They disfigure their faces that their fasting may be seen by others. And so it's more of the same. What we're going to do as we move forward in these lessons today, the whole lesson is we don't do what we do in order to be seen by other people to bring glory to ourselves. The next lessons that we do, we're going to do a lesson on giving. This is a part of Christianity. Jesus said, when you give, he expects that this is going to be something that Christians do. When you give, and so we'll talk about that. We're going to have a lesson on praying. When you pray, this is how you pray. This is what you do. This is what you don't do. We'll talk about fasting. When you fast. In the same way that Jesus expects us to give to the needy and to pray, he says, when you fast. And so we'll talk about that one. But today I just want to draw all the attention towards we don't do it in order to be seen. For all three of these things, they all say, truly I say to you, they have received their reward. I think that this is something that we should just stop for a second. If what you are striving for in your worship, whether it's giving or praying or fasting, if what you are striving for is to be seen by other people and to glorify yourself, then when you go out into the world and you pray in order to be seen, to glorify yourself, congratulations, I hope it was worth it because you got what you were striving for. You get it. Truly I say to you, if this is what you're doing to be seen by others, all three of these say the same thing, then you have received your reward. This is the instruction for each of these three things. In chapter 6 and verse 3, this is what we're supposed to do. That is the alternative. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. That's going to be the key word for each one of these three things. So that your giving may be in secret. Chapter 6 and verse 6. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. Verse 17. When you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And so the fourth part matches the second part. If what you're doing is striving to worship and be in communion or fellowship with God, and it's not for the purpose of elevating yourself or glorifying yourself, he says, your Father who is in secret will reward you. That is the outcome of doing things in the way that we're supposed to be doing them. So don't do things in order to be seen by others. What I would like to do is just spend a few minutes talking about each one of these three things. We'll do each of these when you give as a lesson by itself. But I want to talk for a second about giving for the purpose of being seen, still within the confines of what we're talking about. I don't know what you think about on this one. I'd like to hear your examples or what you're thinking of. After services when we're talking, or shoot me a text message. I would like to know, hey, here's a great example of this. Because when you talk to me about those things, I write them in my notes. And I would like to have this for next time. But when we give, our giving is not to be a production to draw attention to ourselves in the giving that we're doing. Nobody needs to know that I'm giving or who I'm giving to. And so some of the most obvious things that come to my face, to my mind as I think about this. Have you seen, let me say this also. I don't want to be just overly critical because this is about motive. I can't judge another person's motive. But have you seen the thing, especially when we started talking about the second wave of COVID and the shutdown and all this, and moving into the holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas, there was this thing, there was even a hashtag, I don't know the name of the hashtag, but there was this thing, when you go out to a restaurant, you match the amount that you paid for dinner with a tip. And then you take a picture of your receipt and you put it on Facebook so that everybody can see that you gave this really awesome tip to somebody. And maybe, I can see a world where somebody would say, never mind, I can't see a world. I don't know how you give to somebody and then you put a picture of it on Facebook and say, look at what I gave to this person, this really awesome tip, this really great tip. There's probably all kinds of things. Like I'm tempted to say a sentence of like, here's maybe one way that we could do this thing, but it's kind of the exact opposite of what Jesus is talking about here. You don't do something and then say to the world, look at what I did. Here, I'm going to show you. Here's this great thing. I think about this one all the time, and I'm not condemning, if you do this way, but every once in a while in the world of giving and passing stuff around on the internet, there's a GoFundMe that, here's a GoFundMe that popped up. Ryan put a GoFundMe up so we could buy him a new bike, I think, one time or something. Like, there's a GoFundMe for serious reasons for things. Somebody's in the hospital and we need to pay for their hospital expenses or help them out with something like that. And when you give money on GoFundMe, and especially when you want to share the world, the power of this GoFundMe is the social networking aspect, that we share it so that other people can see it and give money to the same thing. But when you give money, there's an option to hide your name and give anonymously, or to give in such a way that I can scroll through the list and say, Mark gave $20, Jay gave $50, Tracy gave this much, Paula gave this much. I'm not trying to tell you what to do or how to do it, but I think that this would be a really good time to think about our practical giving and what Jesus says in chapter 6 and verse 1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. If your purpose is to be seen and to glorify yourself and to say, hey, look, Ryan did this thing, then congratulations, you've received your reward. But if your reward is to be a servant of God and to do this thing because this is what I do as a Christian to serve God, I can hit give anonymously, and God knows that it was true. God knows what has happened, and my reward lies with Him. I think about the same thing. That's kind of one of the things with Venmo. We have a Venmo account right now. And this is what we do. We have a contribution at the end of this. And I don't know, I don't open up Venmo, the app, and scroll through and say, here's who gave money to who. But it's kind of one of the social platform elements of Venmo, is that I can give money to somebody and then everybody can see who I gave money to, or something like that. If you do your contribution on Venmo, just click the nobody needs to see it button. That's not anybody. That's not for the world. It's not for everybody to see that you are contributing however much money to whatever purpose for whatever reason. I'll just keep going back to this passage over and over again in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 1. This is what I do as I prepare for a passage. I just read it multiple times a week and try and beat this concept into my skull. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. I'm supposed to live a righteous life and to do righteous things, and other people can see that righteousness if I have a changed life, but I don't do it for the purpose of being seen. John Stott said this one: there is a sense in which we are not even to tell ourselves. This is the put your left hand in your pocket so that your right hand doesn't know what you're doing. And on this quote, and it's been up there for a while, surely you've seen it now. The idea here is not, I'm going to be giving with this hand, so put this hand. The idea is something kind of like this. You don't need to know. I don't need to make a production so that you see and know what I'm giving. But then what I do is I don't go into my car at the end of the day and I say to myself, I did such a good job today. Because I gave money, and not only did I give money, nobody else knew about it. So I did the thing that I was supposed to do. And now there is this self-congratulation aspect. And that's what's going on here with Don't even pay attention to it yourself. to say, look at what a good person I am. There is a sense in which we are not even to tell ourselves. We are not to be self-conscious in our giving, for our self-consciousness will readily deteriorate into self-righteousness. So subtle is the sinfulness of the heart that it is possible to take deliberate steps to keep our giving secret from men while simultaneously dwelling on it in our own minds in a spirit of self-congratulation. So when you give, don't make a production. It's not for other people. It's for God. It's not even for the person you're giving to. It's for God. When you pray, the same thing is true. If the Pharisees were going to pray, they were going to pray where other people could see them and hear them praying, because that was the goal. The goal was not prayer. The goal was to be seen and for people to say, wow, that guy is religious. And look at what a great prayer he is. Listen to that great prayer. I love this one. I wasn't going to read another quote, but I was looking at it again this morning and I like it. These people, the Pharisees, they love to pray, but unfortunately it is not prayer that they love, nor God that they're supposed to be praying to. They love themselves, and they love the opportunity which public prayer gives them to parade themselves. And so I would say this one more time. Don't misunderstand or misinterpret this passage. This passage is not saying that there's no place for public prayer. You can go all through the New Testament. You can see Jesus praying publicly. You can see the New Testament authors, the apostles and the prophets, writing and speaking to other people, saying, hey, this is what we do. One of the things that we do when we come together as a congregation is we pray together. Ryan started us off with that, and he came up and he prayed, and we all saw him and we all heard it, and we're supposed to do that. But have you ever got the idea? I'm just using Ryan as an example because Ryan was up here this morning doing it. I'm not really pointing at Ryan in this way. Have you ever got the idea that the person leading the prayer was not praying to God, he was praying for us? Have you ever got the sense that that's awfully fancy? And maybe I'm trying to dress it up and make it fancy so that somebody will say, wow, Ryan sure is a great prayer. He must be a really good Christian. Or sometimes you get the sermon prayer where I'm dressing up what I'm doing as a conversation with God and directing this congregation in a conversation with God right now, but really what I'm doing is saying all of the things that I think you poor sinners need to hear in this prayer. Dear God, please, I'll say something that Jay really needs to hear right now. It's not for God. It's for you or for other people. That's not okay. That's not what we do. That's the main point. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. That's not what we do. Look at Luke chapter 18. There's another one. When you fast. Sorry about this. I got my slides bungled here. Luke chapter 18. We've looked at this man already in the Sermon on the Mount lessons that we've been going through. As I read Luke chapter 18 and verses 9 and following, ask yourself, especially the Pharisee, ask yourself if his prayer was for God or was for other people or for some other purpose. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous. There's the purpose. They trusted in themselves that they were righteous. And they treated others with contempt. 2 men went up into the temple to pray. One a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus. And this is the question. He's addressing God. The first word here is God. But is he really talking to God? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this question. You have to make the decision. God, I thank you that I am not like other men. I mean, I can imagine a scenario where he's saying, God, seriously, I'm seriously speaking and thanking you for this. But I'm tempted to think that this prayer was not really for God. Thank you for not making me like all these other pathetic losers, extortioners, unjust people, adulterers, even like this tax collector, the guy standing right there. And listen to what he says. I fast twice a week. I'm telling God this. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. If I'm standing by listening to somebody pray this prayer, I'm thinking probably the prayer's not for God. It's probably for me. The tax collector, on the other hand, it says, standing far off, there's probably part of our clue. He doesn't need to be right in the middle of everything. He's standing far off. He won't lift up his eyes to heaven. He is a humble person and genuinely contrite and poor in spirit. He beats his breast and he says, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I don't probably need other people to know that. I tell you, this man, that tax collector, he's the one who went to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. And so in thinking about fasting, we don't talk about this very often. It's not something that is probably a common practice among Christians. We'll need to talk a little bit about that and see what the Bible has to say about it. But if I'm going to fast and say I'm not going to eat for a given period of time, a day or 2 days or 3 days, and I'm gonna not eat, then what happens to me naturally is A, I get grouchy, and B, I'm walking around. I really want Jay to say, why are you so down? Why are you like that? And I just need to tell you, I'm fasting. I'm in this time of service and prayer and concentration on God, Jay, and I'm just so hungry right now, and I'm so down. Jesus specifically says, it's not for other people to know. It's not for other people to see. That does not mean that there's no place for public fasting. And I'll give you just one example. In Acts chapter 14 and verse 23, Paul and Barnabas are going around to everywhere that they've been on their previous missionary trip. And this is what they're doing as they appoint elders. This is a quote. It says, in every church, with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord in whom they had believed. And so there are situations where we as a church might fast together. It's not a secret in that nobody can know about it, but it is secret in the sense of I'm not trying to draw attention to myself because of it. That's the difference in all of these things. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time just going through the list and saying, and here's an example, and here's an example, and here's an example, just over and over and over again. But this principle applies to so much more besides giving and prayer and fasting. We don't go to church to be seen by other people. We don't sing for the purpose of being heard by other people. Now, that's something that happens. We sing together. That's a great benefit of being in a congregation. We sing together and we hear it, and the congregational singing is encouraging and beautiful, and it's something that I love so much. It's one of the great things about coming back from this lockdown pandemic year is to be able to gather and sing together with the church. But even though when my singing is often to you and for the purpose of encouragement or instruction, it is not for you. It's for God. In John chapter 12 and verses 42 and 43, this is where we'll end. There were a lot of authorities who believed in Jesus, but for fear of the Pharisees, they did not confess him so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. Why? In verse 43. Listen to this description. They love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. If you do what you do for the purpose of being seen, then I hope you like the glory that you get from it, because that's all you're going to get from it. I would just throw one more thing on this list, since we're wrapping this lesson up and thinking about this one more time. At the end of every lesson, we do an invitation, and that is a time where if you are sitting here and you want to be a Christian, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God And I'm willing and ready now to turn away from the sin that has separated me from God. Part of that becoming a Christian is confession. It is a public statement to stand before a body of witnesses and to say what you believe. Jesus is Lord. Jesus is the Son of God. And I'm going to serve him. That's one of those places where motive matters. You're supposed to hear it. It's supposed to be public. It's called confession because it's out loud for all to hear. But it is not for this body of people. It's for God. The same thing is true with baptism. If you say, I need to die to myself and be buried in the waters of baptism, that's something that we watch and participate, but it is for you and the Lord. It is not for other people. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. For then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. If there's somebody here today who knows what you need to do in order to become a Christian and you're ready to do that, we'd love to help you with that now. Or if you're here and you've got some sin that you're battling in your life and you need some help from this body of God's people, this is a good time to come forward and ask for help on a congregational level, because that's our purpose. Riley taught us a couple weeks ago to bear one another's burdens and to help each other. If there's anything we can do for anyone here this morning, come forward, make your needs known as together we stand and sing the invitation song.